Hi, we are now in the learning episode about heading. Heading is very much important in every technical written output because it arranges the thought of the writer as it also helps the reader to understand the text better. There are several techniques in writing the heading, and there are different manual styles that we need to follow in writing the heading. So before we proceed with the details of the lesson, I would like to share my presentation. Now, if you can observe, in the first slide, I have here an example of heading. So you have heading number 1 and we have heading number 2. Heading number 1 is encircled as red, and heading number 2 are encircled in color blue. That makes the idea that heading number 2 are sub-items of heading number 1. Now, what is a heading? It provides an organizational view of the document. It shows logical development of ideas, shows hierarchical relationship of ideas, increase readability of the document by providing breaks and white space, allow the reader to scan and read selectively. For example, if you are reading a research paper, let us say a thesis is divided into several headings. The 5 major headings are chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 that provides for introduction, review of related literature, methodology, results and discussion, and then conclusion. Inside each chapter, there are several subheadings. For example, in chapter 1, like introduction, you have background of the study, you have frameworks, then you have statement of the problem, you have objectives, and some other things that are supposed to be included in chapter 1. And the same goes also with the other chapters of the thesis. Second, when we say it provides us a logical development of ideas, that means that the ideas are arranged accordingly. It can be from what is simple towards what is difficult, or it could be according to importance. Like this one is less important, than the last item on the list is the one that is very much important. But one thing that we have to remember is we come up with headings simply because we look at the welfare of the readers. We want to make sure that the document or the text that we have been written is readable to them, and they could be able to enjoy reading the document. That is something that we need also to ensure. That's why we need to come up with heading. We need to help our readers to understand the text better. This is an example of these are the entries. Now, these are the entries of a very generic report lab. Report lab that means it is an empirical article. That means it is somewhat like a research paper or an experiment. Therefore, in this particular report lab, the first item that we need to read or that we need to write is the abstracts and the keywords. Now, the abstracts and the keywords, it may not mean that these 4 bullets would result to the subheadings. No, these 4 bullets would mean that these are the questions that we need to answer, so we can come up with we can come up with the abstract and the keywords of the particular article. So this is item number 1, and we can expect that the entry for abstract and keywords should respond to the questions: what was done, why did you do it, what did you find, and what are these findings useful and important. The second item is the title. The title of an article. The title of an article or the title of the report lab. Second, you have introduction. Introduction, which provides the readers the background information of the entire document, and it should answer the question, what was studied or what problem was studied, while writing the background, make sure that we are citing documents. Third item is we have materials and methods. When we refer to materials and methods, we need to look at the entire process on how we collected the data, and how we analyze the data. These are the items that we need to look at. Now, if you could observe here, the first bullet says use subheadings to separate different methodologies, because in one document there can be a number of or variations of methodologies that the researcher used. And when we try to enumerate them and discuss them, those are examples of subheadings within the heading of materials and methods. Last item is results and discussions and conclusions. Results and discussions and conclusions. In this particular heading, these are also the items that we need to answer. No? We need to answer. And if necessary, we need to use subheadings also to make sure that the idea is organized and that the idea is presented in a manner that can be understood easily by the readers. Now, we have two kinds of headings. No? One that is function, and then the other is descriptive. No? When we say function, we look at the titles. No? We look at the titles of each, let us say, chapter or each lesson. However, when we say descriptive, we now look at what are the items that we can find within those particular headings. For example, in the function-based, item number 1 is introduction. But in descriptive based headings, instead of writing introduction, it is now ski lift safety issues. Based on, if we try to look at function-based, we have problem definition, but in descriptive-based, it is titled as derailment problems in tow lifts. That makes the difference between what is functional and what is descriptive. And so when we try to use thesis as an example, the chapters in the thesis, these are called as function-based headings. They are not descriptive-based headings. However, the subheadings within the function-based headings of a thesis can be considered, in some situations, can be considered as descriptive-based subheadings. Okay? Now, there are several formats for headings. Number 1, we have APA 6th edition format. So when you try to look at the figure, we have 5 levels, and each level has its different format, and we have to observe this. We have to observe this all of the time, especially when we have decided that we need to follow APA 6th edition format. Okay, APA 6th edition format. So we have to observe this. That means that level 1 is your heading, level 2 is your subheading 1, level 3 is your subheading 2, level 4 is your subheading 3, and then level 5 is your subheading 4. Now, if you're going to ask me, sir, what about there is another level underpinning level 5. Now, what I am telling you is that you as a writer, you can always have the control with your discussion, and so you can control also the headings and the number of subheadings within a particular heading. If, let us say, if it at the end of the day it would result to confusion, then you might as well not to have another subheading, so to avoid conflicts or problems when it comes to format. Now, what are the principles in designing a heading? There are 4. And number 1, we try to look at hierarchical relationship of ideas. That means we have to look at ideas according to complexity, according to importance, or according to time, or according to a specific order that we need to follow or that you have designed to follow. Okay. Next, we have to look at consistency. When we say consistency, that means if all your headings are, let us say, if all your headings are nouns, then you have to make sure none of these headings or subheadings would be adjective. All must be nouns. Third, readability. That means we have to design a particular format for our headings to make sure that, number 1, there is a distinction between the levels, among the levels of the headings. That's number 1. Second, that there is a clear, not a clear definition, but the readers would not be able to have problems identifying, let us say, if this particular heading is under which heading. That is something that we need to really consider, no? And then the last, we have a specificity. When we say a specificity, that means the headings might be descriptive, but we have to make sure it must be specific. Like, it should not float a question of what among the readers. Like, by simply reading the headings, everything else is there already. Like, the reader could be able to now figure out expectations of what are the items inside this particular heading or subheading. Now, that's the last slide. And if you have questions, what you're going to do is to immediately message me in our Microsoft Teams channel. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again in our next learning episode.